Okay, so what we're looking at today, right here, is skull one that was photographed about the 1920s. So the story with that is Joseph Smith and Hyrum Smith's bones were moved around a lot, and they were in unmarked grave for almost 100 years, so like 80 years. They were buried unmarked just in basically a garden that Emma Smith had, and then she wanted to be buried right next to them, and then the her great grandchild of them was living in Nauvoo and just decided to exhume the bones and put them into marked grave in about the 1920s. And so when they pulled out skull one, they knew that Hyrum Smith was shot in the head, because we know that there's a bullet hole in his nose, and so they decided, since they saw that hole going straight through the side of his head, that was Hyrum Smith. That was their conclusion. Whereas skull two, the side of the head, there are no bullet holes going through the skull, but all the facial bones are missing, and I'll go into that in a second. But anyway, about 10 years ago, Curtis Weber decided to do an analysis to decide which skull was Joseph's and which was Hyram's, even though they were already buried in the 1920s and they already marked the graves. People have been analyzing these photographs, so his hope was that he could do measurements like other experts. I've talked to one, and now I get why people did this. I'm slowly learning. I talked to someone that's worked with the FBI identifying people in photographs, and she said, I can't do it from just a death mask. I can't rely on that. But if the skull and the death mask, I could do it. I could prove whether or not your photo is Joseph Smith. I had to tell her that we don't really know for sure, because I really don't think this is a cut and dry conclusion. So Curtis Weaver is basing on a measurement and concluding upon tissue depth, but that was all based on this phrenologist measurement of 8.125 inches, which had to have been done by calipers by the phrenologists, and phrenologists were in a revelation to Joseph Smith said to have been evil, and for phrenology to not be a science. So obviously if it's not science and they're evil, they don't care that much about accuracy. And so I measured my own head from these two areas that they were supposedly measuring from, and it was a lot more than 8.125. From the occipital bone to basically, the brow area in between your eyes. Like, I measured that several times. I'm like, he had a big head according to everyone that knew him. And so he thought the tissue depth would have been like an obese person. So I was like, I'll go ahead and analyze this. I'm just curious to see what I think. And so I went ahead and I'm going to bring back. Here is skull one. I did my own outline of skull one. And I superimposed that onto Curtis Weber's work. And then I distinctly noticed that supraorbital bone area was shaped so different from my outline from skull one. Okay, we'll go back to that. That's my outline of skull one. Onto his, it fit like a glove, and that supraorbital bone area was just shaped perfectly. And so I would think that whole obese by the millimeter, it definitely would have been a lot closer. And so I'm like, why was this so off? And then I realized that his outline was so similar to this man's drawing. Take that away. This man did some sketches. He was one of the first people that the RLDS Church allowed to see the photographs of the skulls. They kept it basically hidden. And so out of respect, I guess, they decided some other group that was analyzing everything, I don't know, they got a hold or permission of Whitaker. I don't really know, but this is his sketch. And this is for educational purposes. But yeah, his outline was really, and this was in the 90s. I mean, he's a really, really good artist, but I don't know if he was sketching it scientifically. I wouldn't really call it a scientific drawing, but his outline was exactly the same as Curtis Weber's. And so again, if we just kind of pull all this back here, come back to Curtis Weber's outline. Yeah, I definitely, I think there was an error made when he was doing that measurement. I think it was really based on Whitaker's outline there. Because I still really think, I'll just kind of show you my outline again. It's just really can be difficult to analyze an old photograph if you're going by the naked eye. But if you're sketching, it's going to come out looking quite different. So that's Whitaker's sketch. But you see, as you get out to like this area, right here and here, it can be difficult to see, shade difference between here and here for some people. But to me, as I analyzed it, I could see there was definitely quite a difference here. I got that right there. So that's really where I'm thinking some errors were made. But anyway, but the only reason that I really care about this is in analyzing my photograph. You'll see on my website, the skull controversy, that I talk about Hyrum Smith, his death mask. When I was hearing about this controversy, I was like, wait a minute, so here's Skull 2, the drawing by Whitaker. And I'm not trying to really criticize him or criticize Curtis Weber. I just disagree with them a little bit. Although Whitaker's an amazing artist, he was sketching and just looking, and there can be small errors, but I wouldn't use them for a scientific study, if that makes sense, to be by the millimeter of someone just by the naked eye drawing. It could be amazing, but it's not scientific. And so Skull 2 is missing all the facial bones. So there's Skull 2 on the right. And then here on the left is the death mask of Hyrum Smith. And it just kept coming into my mind, entrance and exit wounds. And I couldn't stop looking at the right of Hyrum Smith's cheek. And I've looked at so many different angles of the double death mask. And it really looks like a hole. And then I looked up entrance and exit wounds. That kept coming to my mind. And exit wounds look exactly like that hole to the left side of Hyrum Smith's nose, and then to the right of his cheek. Maybe it is. So if that was an entrance and exit wound, that would have shattered all those bones. And so as his body, decomposed, it would have lost all those facial bones. They would have been broken and just would have fallen into the ground and not stayed together. And the other ironic thing is looking at right here is a photograph of Hyrum Smith's shirt that he wore the day that he died. If the bullet hole to the left of his nose, and people said that it wasn't really shot right there in his right shoulder, but on his right shoulder there looks like drips of blood. A lot of blood was dripping down, and so if it came from the right side of his cheek, I think that could be an explanation for the blood on the right of Hyrum Smith's shirt. And also is my analysis of the supraorbital bone. This is, on the left there is the only photograph I could find of Skull 2, and I dragged and dropped that outline from that photograph of Skull 2 onto Hyrum Smith's death mask. It's just that specific angle. It's almost got this triangle shape. And again, looking at this, you'll see more Hyrum Smiths. Since Whitaker sort of saw more of a curved supraorbital bone on Skull 1, that was a huge thing with Curtis in his conclusions 10 years ago, that he thought the supraorbital bone looked more like Hyrum's. Whereas Joseph Smith's supraorbital bone, you'll see right here, is a lot more flat. And so this is an outline that I did. And so basically what you got there on the left is the outline, and then I kind of, with the layers, I took away the picture, and at the right is that same outline. And then this on the left is the death mask of Hyrum Smith. I don't know how old this photograph is, but I think that was before the Dibble death mask got damaged, because you'll see a lot of plaster on his chin. But then you see what looks like you can see a cleft, really, really prominent cleft in Hyrum Smith's chin that almost looks like a double cleft. And then when you look at the drawing by Whitaker, which I think he's an amazing artist, but you can really see a double cleft. But I couldn't find a photograph to verify that other than his drawing. And what really, really, really convinced me that Skull 1 was Joseph Smith's is here on the right. It's the Dibble death mask of Joseph Smith. You'll see this broken bone, and I just outlined this angle that I could see of how his nose looks like it was broken and remodeled to the right. You can see that in Skull 1. In this big indent. It looks like the same shape, and I think I can see that same indent with remodeling on the Dibble death mask as on Skull 1. And I just go into a lot more on my website of this little notch. You can see right there. I outline that. So there's the skull, Dibble death mask. So you can see that there. You can see that same little notch, exact same shape on my photograph. Because when you superimpose the skull 1, onto my photograph, you can see that notch line up. You can see the chin line up. You got the orbital bone there. Of course, this is not scientific, I know, but it is my analysis, and it's really, really fascinating. So experts that I've talked to that have verified people professionally for decades for the FBI did not feel that a death mask would be totally reliable, but if it was a death mask and a skull, it could be done. And so I think that's why people were doing this and pushing Curtis to do this. So he was trying to learn everything I think this woman has known in her own mathematical equations that I've talked to. She's done it for decades. He took a few classes, and that's why I think he decided to go ahead and do this. He's actually a linguist, but he did a forensic analysis, having taken a few classes studying skull and stuff like that. So I don't know, and it's all fun, but I do think this is really important to know whose skull is whose. Not that I think it really matters if, the headstones, I don't think they should be moved if we prove that skull 1 is Joseph Smith. So kind of like, so what if there's a stone that says Hyrum Smith and Joseph's bones are in there? I mean, who's to even say that they have the right legs with the right torso? Like, it all was not together. So I don't think it matters. I think when they're resurrected, they know whose bones are whose, and they're fine. I'm sure they're just happy to be with their family again. Who really cares about a headstone and where it's placed, And I think Curtis just thought it would be horrible to prove it wrong and cause that family to have to move those headstones and admit that Emma Smith has been lying right next to only Hyrum for like almost 200 years. So I don't know. Yeah. But yeah, I think it's important. I think some of that is a legitimate forensic analyst. That's what this woman told me that works for the FBI could prove. She's like, well, you need a forensic analyst to prove this skull is Joseph Smith. I'm like, I know. I'm not one. So this is my rough, analysis. But I think there's some really easy, simple ways that it could be proven. Phrenology numbers are just so not reliable, in my opinion, no matter how smart you are and how hard you work on a study using those numbers and crunching numbers and going by the millimeter. You could move a caliper a little bit and those millimeters just totally change. So that's just where I conclude. But anyway, enjoy.